A Day in the Life of a Feudal Knight. Section 1, The First Light of Dawn. The sun doesn't announce itself with any grand gesture. It doesn't burst onto the scene. Instead, it arrives quietly, almost apologetically, as just a suggestion of gray, a gentle thinning of that heavy velvet blackness that's been sitting in the stone walls of the keep all through the long, cold night. During these early hours, you can't really see the world around you. Instead, you experience it through subtle shifts in the air, through the quiet, rhythmic sounds of a castle that's still at rest. The knight is lying still beneath the weight of heavy wool blankets and furs. His breathing is steady and slow, matching perfectly with the ancient pulse of the masonry that surrounds him. The air in the solar, that's his private chamber, is sharp and thin. It holds the damp chill of a northern morning, the kind of cold that feels like it's seeping directly from the limestone blocks that form the very spine of the tower. Slowly, so slowly you'd barely notice if you were watching, the darkness begins to retreat from the corners of the room. The narrow lancet window, really just a slit in that massive exterior wall, begins to glow with a pale ethereal sort of light. It's not yet gold, not even close. It's more like the color of tarnished silver, the color of wood smoke, the color of that mist that clings to the river down in the valley below. This light crawls across the floor, inching its way over the rushes that have been scattered there to provide a bit of warmth and fragrance. The rushes are made up of dried grasses mixed with lavender and meadowsweet. And as the light touches them, they seem to release the ghost of a summer that's long since passed, a faint, earthy scent that anchors the room in the natural world outside these stone walls. The knight remains completely motionless. He's caught in that fragile, delicate space between the heavy depths of sleep and the gradual awareness that the day is beginning. There's no urgency here, you see. In the medieval world, time isn't measured by the frantic ticking of a clock. There are no alarm bells ringing. Instead, time moves with the slow rotation of the heavens and the canonical hours of the church. Somewhere in the distance, far below the solar, a heavy wooden door creaks on its iron hinges. The sound carries upward through the stone, a low, resonant groan that signals the start of the day's labors for the servants and the kitchen staff. But up here, in the private sanctuary of the knight's chamber, the silence remains mostly undisturbed. Mostly. There's a profound stillness in the stone itself. These walls were built to endure, to withstand the siege of time just as much as the siege of any army. They hold within them the cold of the previous winter and the memory of every single fire that has ever burned in the hearth. The knight feels this permanence as he finally opens his eyes. Above him, the heavy oak beams of the ceiling are dark with age and coated with the soot of many, many candles. They're massive, hewn from trees that stood for centuries before they were finally felled to support this very roof. To look at them is to feel the weight of history pressing down, the continuity of the land stretching back through time. As the light in the room grows stronger, bit by bit, the silhouettes of the furniture begin to take shape. There's the heavy closed chest at the foot of the bed, its iron straps dull and cold to the touch. There's the washstand with its pewter basin, the water within it likely skimmed with a thin veil of ice on this particular morning. And there, standing in the corner, is the wooden frame that holds the knight's everyday surcoat and his heavy cloak. These objects are familiar companions, silent witnesses to this daily transition from man to protector. The knight shifts his weight, and the straw-filled mattress beneath him rustles with a dry, papery sound. It's a reminder of the harvest, of the labor of the peasants who toil away in the fields beyond these castle walls. Every comfort here, you realize, is tied directly to the earth and the seasons. Nothing exists in isolation. The knight reaches out a hand, feeling the shock of the cold air against his skin as he pulls back the edge of the fur coverlet. The chill is an old friend by now, a constant presence that demands a certain hardiness of spirit. You don't complain about the cold in a place like this. You simply acknowledge it as a condition of existence as natural as breathing. He sits up slowly. The movement is deliberate and unhurried. This transition from the warmth of the bed to the biting air of the room is a ritual of discipline, something he's done thousands of times before. He pauses there on the edge of the bed, his bare feet hovering just above the rushes. The floor is treacherous in its coldness, a stark reminder of the harsh reality of life in a stone fortress. When his feet finally make contact, the crunch of the dried herbs beneath his soles is the first true sound of his day. It's a grounding sensation, a physical connection to the floor of his home, to this place he both rules and serves. Across the room, the embers in the fireplace are nothing more than a faint, pulsing red glow beneath a thick layer of gray ash. The fire has spent itself during the night. Its warmth left hours ago, dissipated into the shadows and the stone. The night doesn't call for a servant to rekindle it just yet. He prefers this time of solitary quiet, this space where the only expectations are those he places upon himself. He moves toward the window, his footsteps muffled by the rushes underneath. Reaching the window, he looks out through that narrow opening. The world outside is a sea of white and gray. A thick fog has rolled in from the lowlands, swallowing up the village at the foot of the hill and turning the distant forest into a ghostly assembly of shadows. The air that drifts in through the slit is wet and tastes of moss and wet earth. He can hear the distant, muffled lowing of cattle down in the bailey, the rhythmic thud of a woodman's axe beginning the day's work. These sounds are distant, filtered through that heavy mist, creating a sense of isolation that is both peaceful and profound. Deeply peaceful, actually. In this moment, the night is not a warrior. He's not a landlord. He's not a servant of the crown. He is simply a man standing in the presence of the morning. He watches as the sun finally breaks over the distant ridge. The light turns the tops of the fog into a brilliant, almost blinding white. The sky above the mist is a pale, clear blue, the color of a robin's egg. It's a promise of a fair day ahead, though the dampness of the morning suggests that the warmth will be slow to arrive, taking its time. He turns away from the window and moves over to the washstand. The water in the basin is indeed freezing, a sharp jolt to the senses as he splashes it over his face and neck. It clears away the last remnants of sleep from his mind, leaving his skin tingling and his thoughts sharp and clear. He dries himself with a piece of rough linen. The texture of the fabric is a further awakening. Every sensation this morning is tactile and immediate. The cold water, the rough towel, the scent of the herbs, the sight of the rising sun. Everything is heightened. He begins to dress. Not yet in the finery of his station, mind you. First come the simple undergarments that provide the foundation for his day. The linen shirt is cool against his skin, smelling faintly of the lye soap that was used to wash it and the fresh air in which it was hung to dry. He pulls on his brace, that's a kind of medieval underwear, and ties them with a simple linen cord. The movements are mechanical and practiced, done without thinking. There's a meditative quality to the act of dressing like this. It's a series of small, necessary tasks that prepare the body for whatever challenges might come. As he dresses, his gaze falls upon the small crucifix hanging on the wall beside his bed. It's carved from dark boxwood, simple and unadorned. Before the day truly begins, before the bustle of the castle takes hold and sweeps everything up in its momentum, there is the obligation of prayer. He kneels on the cold floor. The hardness of the stone presses through the rushes against his knees. He bows his head and closes his eyes, moving into a space of internal silence. His prayers are not the frantic petitions of a man gripped by fear. They're the steady, rhythmic recitations of a man of faith, a man who has done this every morning of his adult life. He speaks the words of the Pater Noster and the Ave Maria in a low murmur. The Latin syllables roll off his tongue with a familiar cadence, like water over worn stones. In the quiet of the solar, his voice sounds small and somewhat fragile. Yet the words feel heavy with the weight of tradition, with the accumulated power of centuries. He prays for strength, for wisdom in his judgments, for the protection of those under his care. He prays for his Lord, for his kin, and for the souls of those who have fallen before him. The act of prayer anchors him firmly in place. It connects him to a world that's far larger than the walls of this keep, a world of divine order and eternal truths that stretch beyond the petty concerns of daily life. It provides a moral compass for the day ahead, a reminder that his power as a knight is a gift, one that must be used with justice and mercy. As he finishes his devotions, he remains kneeling for a moment longer, allowing the silence of the room to wash over him like water. The sun is higher now. That silver light has turned to a warm, pale yellow, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The castle is beginning to wake in earnest now. He can hear the sounds of life rising from the bailey below, the clatter of iron-shod hooves on the cobblestones, the shouting of stable boys calling to one another, the barking of hounds eager for their breakfast. The quiet isolation of the early morning is drawing to a close. Soon there will be meetings to attend, disputes to settle, and the constant, grueling physical training that defines his life as a knight. But for now, in this transition between the sacred and the secular, between prayer and duty, there is peace. A brief moment of peace. He rises from his knees. His joints are slightly stiff from the cold and from holding that position. He reaches for his tunic, a heavier garment of wool dyed a deep, somber blue. As he pulls it on, he feels the transition happening inside himself. The man of the morning, the man at prayer, is becoming the knight of the realm. He fastens a simple leather belt around his waist. He's not yet carrying his sword, but he can feel the familiar weight of the leather settling into place. He moves back to the fireplace and uses a small iron poker to stir the embers. A few sparks fly upward, dancing for just a second or two before vanishing into the chimney. He adds a few small chips of dry wood, then a larger log, watching carefully as the flames begin to lick at the edges of the timber. The smell of burning oak begins to fill the room, a warm, comforting scent that signals the true beginning of the household's day. The fire will grow, the room will warm, and the morning mist will eventually burn away under the climbing sun. He stands before the growing fire, his hands outstretched to catch the first hints of heat. This is the ritual of the dawn repeated day after day. The slow awakening of the body, the quiet reflection of the soul, and the steady preparation for the light and whatever it might bring. The day stretches out before him, hours of history yet to be lived, 1,000 small details of life in the Middle Ages waiting to be explored and navigated. But it all starts here, in the gray light of a stone room, with the scent of lavender in the air and the sound of a distant bell beginning to toll. The fire begins to take proper hold of the oak. The small, bright tongues of flame lick around the rough bark and find the dry heartwood within. The knight stands for a long moment, just watching this transformation of heat into light. His shadow stretches long and thin against the opposite wall. The solar is no longer a place of gray uncertainty. It's becoming a room of amber hues and flickering warmth. The transition from the dream state of the night to the waking reality of the day is nearly complete. Outside the heavy oak door, the sounds of the household are intensifying with each passing minute. The muffled thud of footsteps on the stone stairs tells of servants moving about their various duties, carrying water, wood, and news from one part of the keep to another. A soft, rhythmic scratching comes at the door. It's a signal from his squire that the world is ready for him now. With a quiet word of permission, the door creaks open and the squire enters. His breath mists in the air as he carries in a heavy ewer of steaming water. The arrival of the squire marks the end of the night's solitude, the moment when the private man must become the public figure. The steam from the ewer rises in a delicate plume, smelling of wood fire and the minerals of the well. The squire moves with a practiced, quiet efficiency that comes from years of training. He sets the basin down on the heavy trestle table. There's a deep, unspoken bond in these morning movements. The squire is learning not just the art of war, you see. He's learning the art of being, the way a man of rank carries himself in even the smallest moments of the day. He watches as the knight finishes his washing. His eyes note the scars on the older man's shoulders and arms. Each one is a map of a past encounter, a physical history of service and survival written on the body. The light through the lancet window has shifted again. The fog in the valley is beginning to thin, shredding itself against the tops of the ancient oaks and elms that border the castle lands. From this height, the knight can see the movement of the village beginning far below. Thin curls of smoke rise from the thatch-roofed cottages, signifying that the peasants have been awake for quite some time now. Their lives are governed by the same sun, yes, but defined by a completely different set of burdens and responsibilities. To be a knight is to be the protector of that smoke, the guardian of the fields that provide the grain for the castle's bread. It's a heavy realization to carry into the morning, a weight that's more significant than the iron of any breastplate. The squire begins to lay out the clothes for the morning mass and the business of the manor that will follow. This is not yet the heavy armor of the tilt yard, the training ground. This is more refined attire, appropriate for his duties within the keep. There are the shoes made of fine dark wool, tailored to fit the leg tightly, and the long-sleeved coat hardy that will sit over the linen shirt. Each garment is handled with a reverence that borders on the liturgical, that borders on religious ritual. The fabric is heavy and substantial, designed to last for years, a testament to the skill of the weavers and tailors who serve the estate. As the knight is dressed by his squire, he feels the familiar constriction of the wool, the way it defines his posture and demands a certain uprightness of being. He sits on a low stool while the squire fastens the leather points that hold the hose to the belt. The process is slow and methodical, as most things are in this time. In the medieval world, you see, nothing is fast. Nothing is rushed. Every layer of clothing, every fastening of a buckle, every tying of a lace is an act that requires time and careful attention. This slowness is the very essence of the morning. It's a pacing that allows the mind to remain calm and centered, even as the responsibilities of the day begin to gather like storm clouds. Once dressed, the knight turns his attention to his personal grooming. A small mirror of polished steel sits upon the table, reflecting back a face that is etched with the passage of time and the rigors of his station. He trims his beard with a pair of sharp iron shears. The snip-snip of the blades is the only sound in the room besides the steady crackling of the fire. The squire stands ready with a comb made of carved bone, carefully smoothing the knight's hair. This is not vanity, you understand. It's the maintenance of an image. A knight must look the part of a leader, a man of order and discipline, even when no one but his squire is there to witness it. The warmth in the solar has finally reached a comfortable level. The chill still lingers in the corners, lurking behind the heavy tapestries that hang on the walls to dampen the drafts that seep through the stone. But the center of the room is bathed in the golden glow of the hearth. The tapestries themselves tell stories of old hunts in deep forests, battles fought in far-off lands, the legends of saints and kings. As the knight moves about the room, the figures in the weaving seem to flicker and move in the firelight, as if the ancestors themselves are watching the start of another day in the long history of their bloodline. He reaches for his signet ring, a heavy band of gold set with a dark stone, engraved with the device of his house, his family symbol. He slides it onto his finger, feeling its familiar weight settling into place. This ring is his voice when he is silent. It is the mark of his authority on every wax-sealed parchment that will pass across his desk this day. It's followed by a belt of supple leather, dyed red and embossed with silver studs. From this belt hangs a small pouch for coins and a dudgeon dagger, a tool for cutting meat at the table and a weapon of last resort should anything go terribly wrong. The squire brings a cloak of heavy broadcloth, lined with the soft fur of squirrels that were trapped in the local woods. He drapes it over the knight's shoulders with practiced care. The weight of it is a final seal against the morning cold. The knight feels complete now. A figure of stone and wool and iron, ready to descend from his high solar and enter the bustling world of the keep below. He takes one last look around his chamber. The bed is being stripped and aired by a serving girl who has entered quietly, almost like a ghost. The fire is roaring steadily now. The sun is a confident orb in the sky, burning away the last wisps of that silver mist. Before he leaves, he pauses at the window one more time. The bailey below is a hive of activity now. He can see the blacksmith's forge beginning to smoke, see the first bright sparks flying. The rhythmic ring of the hammer on the anvil echoes up the stone walls, clink, clink, clink. It is the heartbeat of the castle, that sound. He sees the hounds being let out for their morning exercise, their tails wagging enthusiastically in the crisp air. He sees the priest crossing the courtyard toward the chapel, his dark robes trailing in the dust behind him. The day is no longer a possibility, no longer a maybe. It is a reality, solid and unavoidable. The knight turns to the door. The squire steps ahead to hold it open for him, as is proper. As he steps out into the corridor, the air is noticeably colder than in the solar, but he doesn't flinch. He doesn't even pause. He moves toward the spiral staircase, his boots making a dull thud on the stone steps. Each step down is a step further into his role, a step toward the chapel, toward the great hall, toward the training grounds where his day of duty will truly begin. Behind him, the solar remains, a quiet sanctuary of light and smoke, waiting patiently for his return when the sun sets and this long day is finally done. But for now, the dawn has passed. Morning has arrived. And the life of the feudal knight begins in earnest. Section 2. The Ritual of the Arming. The transition from the soft wools of the morning to the rigid steel of the warrior is a slow, deliberate journey. It's not something that happens quickly or carelessly. This is a ritual, you see. A ritual that marks the boundary between the man and the instrument of war. In the quiet of the armory, or perhaps back in the solar where the light is now strong and steady, the knight stands upon a small wooden dais. He becomes a pillar, really, around which his squire moves with the practiced grace of a craftsman. This process cannot be rushed. To rush the arming is to invite a failure of leather or metal that could cost a life in the heat of battle, in the chaos of the fray. The air here smells differently than it did just an hour ago. That scent of lavender and wood smoke has been replaced by something sharper, more practical. The metallic tang of oil. The musk of old leather. And the faint, acidic bite of vinegar that's used to scour away the creeping red fingers of rust that are always trying to claim the iron. The ritual begins at the very foundation of the body. The knight has already removed his outer tunic. He's standing once more in his linen brace and shirt. The first true layer of defense is something called the gambeson, also known as the akiton in some regions. This is a heavy, quilted garment, a genuine masterpiece of functional needlework. It's thick, stuffed with layers of linen or wool, or even horsehair in some cases. All of it stitched into vertical channels that run the length of the torso and arms. As the squire holds the garment open, the knight slides his arms into the sleeves. It's a tight, snug fit. The gambeson isn't merely for warmth, you understand. It's the essential shock absorber. Without it, the impact of a mace or the crushing weight of a poleaxe would shatter bone even if the armor above it remained completely unpierced. The knight feels the familiar squeeze of the gambeson against his ribs. It's a comforting pressure in its way, a signal to the body that the time for soft thoughts has ended. The squire begins to lace the front of the garment, pulling the linen cords tight. With every pull, the knight's chest is compressed. His posture is forced into an unnatural military kind of rectitude, an uprightness that doesn't exist in everyday life. The weight of the gambeson alone is significant. It's a precursor to the heavier burdens that are still to come. It smells of sweat and lye, the permanent scent of a garment that has seen many, many days of hard exertion. Once the torso is secured, the squire moves to the arms, tying the small leather points that ensure the sleeves don't bunch up at the elbows during movement. Next come the legs. In the world of the knight, protection begins from the ground up. That's the logic of it. The squire kneels at the knight's feet, reaching for the mail shows. These are long stockings of interlocking iron rings, thousands upon thousands of them, each one painstakingly riveted by a master armorer. The knight lifts a foot, resting it on the squire's shoulder or perhaps a low stool. The mail is cold when it first makes contact. a shock against the wool of the inner hose. But it quickly warms against the body as metal does. The squire pulls the mail up the leg, smoothing it out carefully to ensure there are no folds that might chafe the skin or pinch the muscle during a long day in the saddle. The weight of the mail is deceptive. Held in the hands, it feels like a heavy, fluid cloth, almost alive in how it moves. But once draped over the limbs, it becomes a grounding force and anchor. It's secured to the knight's belt, the cingulum as it's called, by sturdy leather thongs. The squire ties these with double knots, checking their tension carefully. If the leg armor is too loose, you see it will sag and trip the wearer. If it's too tight, it will cut off the circulation during a long gallop. There's a specific rhythm to the squire's hands as he works. Tug, tuck, tie. A repetitive motion that has been performed thousands upon thousands of times in the history of this very keep. Over the mail shows come the polions and greaves. That's the plate protection for the knees and shins. The polions are shaped like shallow bowls of steel, designed specifically to deflect a blow away from that vulnerable joint. The knight flexes his knee as the squire buckles the leather straps behind the leg. He listens for the sound, that faint dry creak of the leather and the dull clink of the steel plates meeting one another. This is the soundtrack of the arming ritual. A symphony of small metallic noises that build steadily toward a crescendo of readiness. The greaves are snapped into place over the shins, covering the front of the leg where the bone is most exposed, most vulnerable. The knight stamps his foot on the wooden dais, testing the fit. The weight is becoming a part of him now, an extension of his own skeleton. Now they turn their attention to the hauberk. This is the great shirt of mail that protects the torso. This is the centerpiece of the knight's defensive array. The squire lifts the hauberk high, and the rings shimmer like the scales of a great fish in the morning light streaming through the window. The knight bows his head and raises his arms, and the squire drops the mail over him. It's a moment of total immersion. For just a second or two, the knight's world is nothing but the dark, metallic interior of the shirt and the sound of 1,000 rings cascading over his head. It lands on his shoulders with a heavy thump, a weight of 30 or 40 pounds settling instantly onto his frame. He adjusts his shoulders, shaking the mail into place so it hangs evenly on both sides. The squire quickly circles around him, cinching a leather belt tightly around the waist. This is a crucial step, actually one of the most important. The belt takes the weight of the mail off the shoulders and distributes it onto the hips instead, allowing the knight to move with what seems like a deceptive agility. Without the belt, the hauberk would be an exhausting burden that would wear a man down in minutes. With it, it becomes a flexible, protective skin. The knight breathes in deeply, feeling the mail expand and contract with his lungs. It's like an iron rib cage over his own. The sleeves of the hauberk reach all the way down to the wrists. In some cases they terminate in what are called mufflers, integrated mittens of mail that protect the hands. The squire helps the knight pull these on, ensuring the leather palms are supple and provide a good grip. The knight opens and closes his fists, feeling the tension of the rings across his knuckles. Every movement is heavier now. Every gesture requires more intent, more deliberate thought. He is no longer the man who woke in the soft rushes just hours ago. He is becoming a silhouette of iron, a figure designed for the singular purpose of endurance. The silence of the room is now filled with the constant, low-frequency jingle of the mail. It's a sound like coins being shaken in a bag, but deeper and more resonant than that. It's the signature sound of the knightly class, really. A noise that announces his presence before he is even seen. The squire now reaches for the surcoat, the long, sleeveless garment of silk or heavy linen that is worn over the armor. It's dyed in the colors of the knight's house. Perhaps a bold crimson. Perhaps a deep forest green. It's embroidered with his heraldic device, his family's symbol. The surcoat serves a practical purpose as well as a symbolic one. It protects the mail from the direct heat of the sun, which can turn those iron rings into a searing mesh in the height of summer. And it keeps the rain from causing immediate rust. As the squire pulls the surcoat over the knight's head and smooths it down carefully, the transformation is nearly complete. The knight is now a walking banner. A vivid splash of color against the gray stone of the armory. The heraldry on his chest is his identity. It's his lineage. It's his oath made visible to all who look upon him. The squire moves to the side, picking up the separate mail coif. This is a hood of mail that will protect the neck and head. The knight tilts his head back as the squire settles the coif over his brow. It covers the ears and the throat, leaving only the face exposed to the air. Underneath the coif, the knight wears a padded arming cap. This is to prevent the iron from rubbing directly against his scalp and to provide one more layer of cushioning against a blow to the head. The squire laces the coif tight under the chin, the leather cords biting slightly into the skin. There is a profound sense of enclosure now. The knight's hearing is slightly muffled by the mail over his ears. His peripheral vision is narrowed, reduced. He is being drawn further into himself, into a state of focused concentration. The squire takes a step back, surveying his work with a critical eye. He looks for any loose straps, any twisted rings, any gap in the defenses that might prove fatal. This is the final check, the moment of quiet assessment before the last and heaviest pieces of plate are applied. The knight stands still, completely motionless. His breathing is slow and measured. He's feeling the total weight of the iron as it warms to his body temperature, gradually becoming a part of his very being. The final stage of the arming ritual is the transition into plate armor. While the mail provides a flexible, fluid defense against the edge of a blade, it is the rigid steel of the plate that offers true defiance against the crushing force of a mace or the piercing point of a war lance. The squire reaches for the breastplate, a curved expanse of polished steel that reflects the hearth fire like a dark mirror. This piece is the heart of the knight's protection. As it's held against his chest, the knight exhales, hollowing his torso to allow the steel to sit as close to the gambeson as possible. The squire reaches around behind him, pulling the leather straps across the back and buckling them with a forceful tug. The knight feels the restriction immediately. It's a strange paradox when you think about it. The armor that keeps him safe also limits his humanity in a way. He cannot slump his shoulders the way an ordinary man might. He cannot breathe with the shallow ease of a common person. He must breathe deeply, using his diaphragm to push against the cold, unyielding curve of the steel. The breastplate is followed by the backplate. The two pieces join at the sides to create a rigid cage of iron around his torso. The squire then attaches the falds, overlapping horizontal bands of steel that hang from the waist to protect the hips and lower abdomen. They clatter softly against one another, a metallic rustle that accompanies every shift of the knight's weight. Next are the arms. The squire begins with the rear braces for the upper arms and the vambraces for the forearms. These are joined at the elbow by the couters, pointed, fan-like plates that protect the sensitive joint while still allowing for a full range of motion. The knight holds his arm out straight, and the squire fits the steel around the limb, cinching the straps tight. There is a specific art to getting the tightness just right. If the vambrace is too loose, it will slide down and interfere with the movement of the wrist, which must remain supple to guide a sword or a rein. The knight rotates his arms slowly, watching the way the plates slide over one another in a seamless, mechanical dance. It's a marvel of medieval engineering when you really look at it. A suit of clothes made of stone and light. Now comes the most iconic piece, the helmet. For the morning's duties, the knight may choose a simpler bassinet rather than the heavy, suffocating great helm that's used for the tilt, for jousting. The squire picks up the helmet. Its surface is clean and smells of the oil that's used to keep the visor moving smoothly on its hinges. The knight takes a final, deep breath of the open air before the steel descends over him. The helmet is lowered carefully onto the padded cap and the mail coif. The world changes instantly. Completely. The sound of the room, the crackle of the fire, the squire's breathing, the distant clatter of the bailey, is suddenly dampened, echoing as if from the bottom of a deep well. The visor is currently raised, allowing the knight a narrow field of vision through the opening. He looks at his squire and for a moment their eyes lock. In this shared silence, there is a lifetime of training and mutual dependence. Years of working together. The squire then reaches up and snaps the visor shut. The world is reduced to a thin horizontal slit. The eye slits, called ocularia. The knight's breath now echoes inside the steel, a rhythmic, metallic huffing that warms the interior of the helmet. The smell of his own breath, mixed with the scent of the metal and the padding, becomes his entire sensory universe. He is no longer a face. He is a mask of steel. An anonymous force of nature. The final pieces are the gauntlets. These are masterpieces of the armorer's craft truly. Consisting of dozens of tiny overlapping plates, like scaled armor, sewn onto a leather glove. They protect the hands, the most vital and vulnerable tools of the knight, without sacrificing the ability to feel the leather grip of a sword. The knight slides his hands into the gauntlets. The leather is cool and firm against his skin. He flexes his fingers, and the steel scales on the back of his hand ripple like the skin of a serpent, moving with organic fluidity. He reaches out and picks up his gauntlet mate, testing the grip. The sound of steel on steel is a sharp, definitive clack. He is now fully encased, completely armored. He stands for a moment, adjusting to the sudden increase in mass. He weighs nearly 60 or 70 pounds more than he did when he woke this morning. Yet the weight is so perfectly distributed across his entire body that he doesn't feel crushed. Instead, he feels powerful. He feels as though he has stepped out of the flow of ordinary time and into a state of permanence. He is a statue brought to life. He moves across the room and the sound is no longer the soft crunch of rushes under bare feet. It's the heavy rhythmic thud of a juggernaut. Every joint of the armor sings its own particular note, the squeak of leather, the jingle of mail, the chime of plate on plate. The squire now presents the sword belt. This is the final mark of his status. The belt is heavy, made of thick, doubled leather. From it hangs the long sword in its scabbard of wood and hide. The knight takes the belt and settles it over his hips, the sword hanging at a precise angle at his left side. He rests his gauntlet hand on the pommel, a gesture as natural as breathing to him. The sword is the extension of his soul, really. The physical manifestation of his oath to protect and serve. He draws it an inch from the scabbard, just enough to see the gleam of the sharpened edge catching the light, before letting it fall back with a satisfying hollow thud. The ritual of the arming is complete. The squire bows low, a sign of respect for the figure that now towers before him. The knight nods, a slow, heavy movement of the helmeted head. The process has taken nearly half an hour. A half hour of focused, meditative preparation. The knight is now ready to face the world. Not as a man who feels the chill of the morning. Not as someone vulnerable to the elements. But as a pillar of the feudal order. As something more than human. He turns toward the door. His movements are deliberate and majestic. Each step is a calculation of momentum, of balance. He leaves the solar behind. The fire is still burning in the hearth, but its warmth is no longer necessary to him. He carries his own climate within the steel now. As he descends the stairs toward the chapel for the morning mass, the sound of his armor echoing through the stone corridors is a signal to all who hear it. The protector of the land has risen. The guardian is awake and armed. The day has truly begun, and the slow, heavy rhythm of medieval life continues its inexorable march forward. Section 3 Mass and the Morning Meal. The knight moves from the private confines of the solar into the public arteries of the castle. His destination is the chapel. The air in the stone corridors is significantly colder than it was in his chamber, but the thick layers of his gambeson and the heavy steel of his breastplate provide a buffer against that damp chill. Each footfall on the spiral stone stairs is a heavy, resonant strike. It's a sound that precedes him, announcing his presence, signaling his descent through the keep. The transition from the ritual of arming to the ritual of faith is a seamless one in the life of a medieval man. The sword and the cross are two sides of the same coin, you see. The strength of the arm is seen as a direct extension of the purity of the soul. As he nears the ground floor, the smell of the castle changes. The scent of wood smoke and old stone is joined by something new, the faint, drifting aroma of frankincense and beeswax. The chapel is a sanctuary of shadow and flickering light, carved into the very heart of the keep itself. Its walls are thick, designed to withstand siege just like every other part of this fortress. Yet within those walls, the atmosphere is one of profound, hushed fragility. The knight enters through the heavy arched doorway. His gauntlets click softly as he removes his helmet and tucks it under one arm. The sudden exposure of his head to the cool air is a reminder of his vulnerability. Before God, even a knight in full armor is just a man. The light inside the chapel is different from the bold, golden sun of the bailey outside. Here the light is filtered through small, thick panes of colored glass. It casts deep jewel tones across the stone floor, bloody reds, deep sea blues and emerald greens. The air is heavy with the breath of the faithful who have already gathered here. The servants, the men-at-arms, the castle officials. They stand in the shadows, their voice is nothing more than a low rhythmic murmur that blends with the crackle of the tall beeswax candles standing on the altar. The priest is clad in vestments of heavy brocade that shimmer in the candlelight. He stands with his back to the congregation, facing the east. That's the tradition, always facing east. The service of Mass is conducted in Latin, a language that most in the room do not fully understand. Yet the cadence of the words is as familiar to them as the sound of the wind or the rain. To the knight, the Latin is a sacred code. A link to the eternal, to something far beyond this stone room. He kneels on the hard stone of the chancel. The weight of his armor presses down upon his joints. There is a specific physical penance in this posture. The metal bites into his shins. The mail pulls at his shoulders. But he welcomes the discomfort actually. It is a small sacrifice. A way to anchor his wandering thoughts to the gravity of this moment. The priest's voice rises and falls in the ancient chant of the Gregorian style. It's a slow, mournful sound that seems to vibrate within the stone walls themselves, as if the walls are singing along. The knight closes his eyes, letting the sound wash over him like water. In the darkness of his closed lids, the stresses of the coming day begin to recede. The disputes over land, the maintenance of the walls, the training of the squires. All of it fades, at least for now. This is the hour of the Spirit, a time to align his will with the perceived order of the universe. He reflects on the saints, those celestial warriors who once walked the earth in armor much like his own. And he asks for their intercession, their help in the trials to come. The climax of the service is the elevation of the host. A small silver bell rings. Its clear, high-pitched tone cuts through the thick atmosphere of the chapel like a blade of light. A profound silence falls over the room, a silence so absolute that the knight can hear the distant cry of a hawk circling the battlements outside. Every head is bowed. In this moment, the temporal world and the divine world are believed to touch, to intersect. The knight feels a sense of immense smallness. A realization that for all his power and land, for all his armor and his sword, he is merely a brief spark in the long, cold history of the world. It is a humbling thought. And in that humility he finds a strange kind of peace. The service concludes with a final blessing. The priest's hand traces the sign of the cross in the air. The knight rises, his armor jingling as he stands. The sound echoes in the now quiet chapel. He replaces his helmet. The world once again narrows to the horizontal slit of the visor. And he turns to leave. The spiritual duty of the day is fulfilled. And now the physical needs of the body must be addressed. Leaving the chapel, the knight makes his way toward the great hall. The sun is now high enough to flood the courtyard with a bright, pale light that glints off the polished surfaces of his plate armor. The bailey is alive with the sounds of the morning. The rhythmic thud of a cooper's mallet. The splashing of water into wooden troughs. The chatter of women at the well drawing water for the day. He enters the great hall, a vast space dominated by heavy timber beams and a central hearth that is already roaring with a fresh fire. The morning meal, the breakfast, is not the elaborate feast that the evening will bring. It's a functional meal, designed to provide the energy needed for a day of heavy labor and martial practice. The knight takes his place at the high table, which is set upon a raised dais at one end of the hall. From here, he can look down upon the long trestle tables where his household gathers. The furniture is heavy oak, scarred by decades of use and polished smooth by the sleeves of countless men who have sat here before. The first thing placed before him is a trencher. That's a thick, flat round of stale bread that serves as his plate. It's coarse and hard, designed to soak up the juices of the meal without disintegrating into mush. Beside it is a small mound of salt, a precious commodity more valuable than you might think, and a knife of sharpened steel with a handle of dark horn. There are no forks, you should know. The knight uses his fingers and his knife with a practiced, rugged kind of elegance. The food is simple but hearty. There's a bowl of thick pottage, a slow-cooked stew of leeks, onions, cabbage, and dried peas, thickened with oats and flavored with a small piece of salted pork. The steam rises from the bowl, smelling earthy and sweet. He eats slowly, methodically. The warmth of the pottage spreads through his chest, a welcome counterpoint to the cool weight of his armor. There is also a loaf of manchip bread. That's the fine, white wheaten bread reserved for the nobility. And a wedge of hard, pungent cheese made from the milk of the castle's own sheep. To wash it down, the squire pours a goblet of small ale. This is not the heavy, intoxicating brew of the evening. This is a light, fermented drink that is safer to consume than the often tainted water of the well. It's crisp and slightly bitter, tasting of grain and the wooden cask it was stored in. The knight drinks deeply, feeling the liquid cut through the saltiness of the pork and the thickness of the pottage. As he eats, the great hall fills with the low hum of conversation. It's a time for the exchange of news and the laying out of the day's schedule. The bailiff approaches the high table, waiting respectfully for a break in the night's meal to discuss the grain stores or perhaps a dispute between two tenant farmers. The knight listens while he chews. His mind is shifting from the celestial heights of the chapel to the grounded realities of estate management. Each bite of bread, each sip of ale, is fuel for the duties to come. The morning light streams through the high, narrow windows of the hall, catching the dust motes and turning them into shimmering golden threads that drift through the air. The fire in the hearth crackles. A large log shifts and sends a shower of sparks up the chimney. The knight finishes his pottage, using a crust of bread to wipe the trencher clean. The bread, now soft with the juices of the stew, is the final, most flavorful part of the meal. He eats it with relish, leaving nothing to waste. Nothing. He sits for a moment after the meal is done. His hands rest on the edge of the table. The physical satisfaction of the food combined with the spiritual quiet of the Mass has prepared him for the transition into the most demanding part of his day. The morning meal is the bridge, you see. The bridge between the quiet of the dawn and the noise of the afternoon. He signals to his squire to bring his riding gloves. The time for sitting is over. The manor, the fields, and the training grounds are calling to him. The conclusion of the meal brings a different kind of stillness to the great hall. While the first half of the hour was dedicated to the physical act of breaking the fast, this second half is dedicated to the digestion of thought and the slow gathering of the household's momentum. The knight lingers at the high table. His fingers trace the grain of the oak, feeling the patterns in the wood. The heavy trencher bread, now largely consumed or set aside for the alms basket for the poor, has left a faint dampness on the wood. This is the moment where the morning's spiritual clarity meets the day's practical requirements. The light from the high clerestory windows has shifted. The beams of sun are now striking the opposite wall, illuminating the faded heraldic banners that hang in the rafters. They stir slightly in a draught, the silk and wool whispering of ancestral victories and the long, unbroken line of service that the knight represents. As the servants begin to clear the trestle tables below, Their movements are rhythmic and subdued. Practiced. The clatter of wooden bowls and the swish of the broom over the rushes create a backdrop of domestic industry. The knight watches them with a detached but observant eye. He knows each of these people by name. Their lives are inextricably bound to his own. This sense of community is the true foundation of the feudal system. Not just the stone of the walls or the steel of the sword, but the shared reliance on the land and the seasons. The knight's breakfast was not merely for his own sustenance. It was a communal act that signaled the safety and stability of the entire keep. The squire returns carrying a shallow basin and a linen towel. This is the final ritual of the meal, the washing of the hands. Even though the knight has been wearing gauntlets for much of the morning, the act of eating with one's fingers, as is the custom, requires a cleansing afterward. The water is cool and scented with a sprig of rosemary. That sharp, resinous smell clears the palate and the mind. He dips his fingers into the water. The ripples catch the light, and he dries them with the rough textured linen. The friction of the cloth against his skin is a grounding sensation. A transition from the internal world of prayer and nourishment back to the external world of action. With the meal concluded, the knight grants an audience to his steward. This is a time of quiet, low-voiced consultation. The steward brings a small wax tablet or a scroll of parchment, listing the day's immediate concerns. They speak of the smokehouse, where the autumn's haul of venison is being cured and preserved. They discuss the repair of the mill wheel, which has been groaning under the weight of the spring rains. The knight listens carefully. His chin is resting on his hand. The metal of his vambrace is cold against his skin. To someone listening, these details might seem mundane, unimportant even. But in the slow, rhythmic life of the Middle Ages, these are the essential gears of survival. A knight who does not know the state of his grain stores is a knight who cannot lead his men. Outside the hall, the sounds of the castle have reached their peak morning volume. The braying of a mule in the bailey, the shouting of orders from the master of the horse, and the distant, muffled ringing of the blacksmith's anvil create a tapestry of sound that filters through the thick stone walls. The knight stands. The movement causes his mail to shift and chime like 1,000 tiny bells. He picks up his helmet from the table. The weight of the steel is familiar and comforting in his hands. The transition is complete. The morning's grace has been sought. The body's hunger has been answered. And the steward's reports have been heard. He walks toward the great oak doors of the hall. His squire follows a few paces behind as is proper. As he steps out into the courtyard, the full force of the daylight hits him. The morning mist has vanished entirely, burned away by the climbing sun. It's left behind a sky of brilliant, piercing blue. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth, horse manure, and wood smoke. The true smell of the medieval world, really. He pauses at the top of the stone steps, looking out over his domain. From this vantage point, he can see the guards on the battlements, their spears glinting in the sun, and the peasants moving toward the outer fields to begin their day's labor. The knight takes a deep, steadying breath. The slow, methodical pace of his morning has provided him with a reservoir of calm, a foundation of peace. He is ready now for the business of the manor, the next phase of his long day. He descends the steps. His boots strike the cobblestones with a definitive, ringing sound. The morning meal is a memory now, a quiet anchor in a day that is about to become much louder and much more demanding. He is no longer just a man. He is the law. He is the protector. He is the focal point of this small, stone-walled universe. Section 4. The business of the manor. The spiritual and physical nourishment of the morning now gives way to the gravity of governance. To be a knight is to be a warrior, yes. But in the long stretches between campaigns, between battles, it is to be a judge, a landlord, and a diplomat. The knight moves from the great hall to the solar or a dedicated chamber of audience. A room where the air is thick with the scent of old parchment and the cold, mineral smell of the castle's deep foundations. This is the seat of his secular power. Here, the abstract concept of feudalism, that complex web of obligations and loyalties, becomes a series of tangible human interactions. The business of the manor is a slow, methodical process of listening, weighing, and deciding. It's a task that requires a different kind of endurance than the battlefield. A mental fortitude to navigate the intricate webs of local custom, law, and personality. He seats himself in a high-backed chair of carved oak. Its arms are worn smooth by the grip of his predecessors, by generations of men who sat in this very spot. The squire stands behind him, a silent shadow, while the steward remains at his side, acting as the memory of the estate. The light in this room is steady, pouring in from a larger window that overlooks the inner bailey. It illuminates the heavy table before him, where several rolls of vellum are laid out, held open by smooth river stones. These are the manorial rolls. The written record of every field, every head of cattle, and every obligation owed by those who live under his protection. To look upon these scrolls is to see the anatomy of his world. The first business of the day is the hearing of petitions. In the feudal world, the knight is the highest local authority. The person to whom the peasantry brings their grievances and their needs. One by one the petitioners are brought forward. They enter with a mixture of reverence and anxiety. Their rough woolen clothes smell of the fields and the hearth. They stand before the knight, hats held in weathered hands. Their eyes are often fixed on the rushes at their feet, unable or unwilling to meet his gaze directly. The knight watches them with a steady, unblinking gaze. He must be accessible, you see. A lord who is distant is a lord who invites instability. Yet he must maintain the dignity of his station. It's a delicate balance. The first case is a dispute over a boundary. A common occurrence in a world where land is the only true currency. Two brothers stand before him. Their faces are lined by years of toil. They argue over a strip of fallow land near the forest edge. They speak in the local dialect, their voices thick with emotion. They talk of ancient markers, of stones moved in the dead of night, of the memory of their father's father, what he told them when they were boys. The knight listens to the cadence of their speech, looking for the truth hidden beneath the layers of resentment and old anger. He does not interrupt. In this slow history, silence is a tool of justice. He allows the brothers to exhaust their arguments. The only sound in the room is the occasional scratching of the steward's quill as he makes a note on a scrap of parchment. After the brothers have spoken, after they've said everything they need to say, the knight turns to the steward. He asks for the record of the land in question. The steward leans over the table. His finger traces the Latin script on the vellum. He speaks of the hide and the virgate, the ancient measurements of the soil, measurements that go back centuries. The knight weighs the written record against the oral testimony. His decision must be fair, because a perceived injustice can fester for generations, weakening the social fabric of the manor like rotten timber. Finally he speaks. His voice is low but firm, carrying the weight of finality. He orders the boundary stones to be reset in the presence of the village priest and two neutral elders. The brothers bow. Their tension visibly breaks. They leave the room, their footsteps echoing in the corridor. And the knight takes a moment to reset his own mind before the next petitioner is called. The business continues with the mundane but vital details of the estate's economy. A widow comes to ask for a reduction in her Harriet. That's the death duty owed to the lord when a tenant passes away. She offers a sickly calf. It's all she has left. The knight looks at her, seeing not just a tenant, not just an obligation on a scroll, but a person whose survival is his responsibility. He confers with the steward in a whisper. They discuss the grain stores, the coming winter, and the lady's reputation for hard work over the years. In an act of noblesse oblige, the obligation of nobility, he waives the duty. He allows her to keep the animal to sustain her children. It's a small gesture, but it secures a loyalty that gold could never buy. This is the true work of the manor. The constant balancing of the law with the needs of the human heart. Between the petitioners, the knight reviews the accounts with the bailiff. They discuss the corvée, the labor service owed by the peasants on the lord's own land, the domain. They talk of the repair of the heavy plows and the health of the oxen. The knight's mind moves through the geography of his holdings. The north field, currently planted in wheat. The south field lying fallow this year. The communal pasture where the sheep graze. He must understand the rhythm of the earth as well as the rhythm of the sword. He asks about the woodward, ensuring that the forest is being managed properly and that no one is taking more fireboat or houseboat, that's firewood and building timber, than their allotment. The forest is a precious resource, providing the timber for the castle's defenses and the fuel for its fires. As the morning progresses, the light in the room grows warmer. The dust motes dance in the shafts of sun coming through the window. The knight feels the weight of his armor, a constant reminder of his dual role as judge and warrior. He shifts in his chair. The leather creaks. The mail chimes softly. The business of the manor is not a series of quick decisions. It's a slow immersion into the life of the land. He hears of a broken bridge that needs timber from the Lord's woods. He hears of a strayed hound that has been found in a neighbor's barn. He hears of a birth and a death. Each piece of news is a thread in the tapestry of his reign. The steward brings forward a more complex matter. A dispute with a neighboring knight over water rights. A stream that feeds the mill has been diverted upstream. This is a matter of politics and power, requiring a delicate touch. The knight dictates a letter. His words are carefully chosen by the steward to be firm but honorable. It's an invitation to a meeting. A suggestion of a peaceful resolution before the matter is taken to the count's court. The knight's signet ring is pressed into the hot, red wax. The image of his crest, a lion or a hawk, is set firmly in the seal. This small piece of wax carries his authority across the hills, a silent messenger of his will. The hours of the late morning are consumed by these interactions. It's a marathon of listening. The knight's focus never wavers, though the air in the room becomes stale and the stone walls seem to press inward. He is the anchor of this community. Without his presence, the disputes would escalate. The land would go untended, and the delicate order of the feudal world would fray at the edges. He takes a sip of water from a pewter cup. The liquid is cool and clear. Before nodding to the bailiff to bring in the next person. The work is quiet. It is slow. And to some it might be boring. But it is the foundation upon which the towers of the castle are built. The sun reaches its zenith, casting short, sharp shadows across the courtyard visible through the solar window. The heavy atmosphere of the morning's petitions begins to shift from the resolution of external disputes to the internal management of the castle's own resources. The knight remains in his high-backed chair. But the line of peasants has ended, replaced by the specialized officers of the household. This is the time for the view of account, a detailed look into the stores that allow the fortress to breathe and survive. The steward unrolls a longer, narrower scroll. The granary record. The discussion turns to the tithe, the portion of the harvest set aside for the church. And the multure, the fee paid by the villagers to use the Lord's mill. The knight leans forward. His gauntlet hand rests on the table near the inkwell. He listens to the numbers. Quarters of wheat, bushels of rye, and the weight of the barley destined for the brewhouse. These are not merely statistics, you understand. They are the insurance policies against the lean months of late winter, when the snow is deep and the stores run low. If the grain is damp, it will rot. If the mill is slow, the village will hunger. The knight asks about the condition of the granary roof, noting a report of a leak near the western eaves. He orders the master of works to attend to it before the next rains. Because in this world, a small hole in a roof can lead to a great hole in the treasury. Following the grain comes the tally of the livestock. The head shepherd is brought in. A man who smells of lanolin and the open hills. He speaks of the foldage, the practice of penning sheep on the fallow fields to fertilize the soil with their dung. It's a slow, ancient cycle of renewal. They discuss the health of the ewes and the number of lambs that survive the spring. The knight knows that the wool from these sheep is his most liquid asset. The golden fleece, that can be sold to the merchants from the distant cloth towns to pay for new horses or the repair of the battlements. Every hoofbeat on the hills is a beat of the manor's heart. The business then turns toward the darker side of manorial life. The court leet. This is where the knight deals with petty crimes and breaches of the peace within the village. A man has been caught forestalling, buying goods before they reach the market to drive up the price. Another has grazed his cattle on the common meadow out of season. These are the small frictions of communal living. The knight does not seek to punish with cruelty, but with correction. He imposes fines, often paid in labor or in kind. A few hens. A day's work on the castle ditch. The goal is the restoration of balance. The rhythm of the court is slow, deliberate, and predictable. To the villagers, the knight's justice is like the weather. Sometimes harsh, but always a constant reality of their landscape. As the session nears its end, the knight reviews the assize of bread and ale. He ensures that the village baker and the alewife are providing products of the correct weight and quality. To cheat the people is to invite unrest. And the knight's duty is to ensure that the market is a place of honest exchange. He examines a wooden tally stick, a piece of hazelwood notch to record debts. He runs his thumb over the rough cuts, feeling the physical record of what is owed. This is the medieval ledger. A tactile and honest way of keeping track in a world where few can read but all can count the notches on a stick. The final item on the morning's agenda is the report from the constable of the watch. They discuss the state of the armory and the readiness of the FYRD, the local levy. While the knight is the professional warrior, the security of the manor depends on the able-bodied men of the village who must be ready to man the walls if the beacon fires are lit. He orders a review of their equipment. Spears to be straightened. Leather jacks to be oiled. This is the bridge between the peaceful administration of the land and the martial discipline of the afternoon. The knight finally rises from his chair. His body is stiff from the hours of sitting in the heavy plate. And he stretches his arms. The joints of his armor make a series of sharp, rhythmic clicks. The steward rolls up the parchments and secures them with linen ties. The room, which has been the center of the world's problems for the last few hours, is now quiet once more. The dust motes continue their slow dance in the sunlight, indifferent to the weight of the decisions made beneath them. He moves to the window and looks out. The village is quiet. The people have returned to their fields for the midday rest. The knight feels a sense of quiet accomplishment. The business of the manor is rarely glorious. And it is never fast. But it is the invisible thread that holds the stone and the people together. He turns toward the door. His mind is already shifting. The time for the pen and the parchment is over. The afternoon belongs to the horse, the lance, and the grueling physical discipline of the warrior. He leaves the solar. His heavy footsteps echo down the stone corridor, marking the end of the morning's governance and the beginning of the soldier's toil. Section 5. The discipline of the tilt. The transition from the quiet, intellectual labor of the manorial court to the explosive physical demands of the tilt yard is a jarring one. Yet it is the very essence of the knight's existence, really. After the midday sun has begun its slow descent toward the western horizon, the castle moves into a state of martial preparation. The knight descends the stone steps of the keep and crosses the bailey toward the stables. The air here is thick with the ammonia of horse urine, the sweet, dry scent of hay, and the oily musk of leather tack. This is the world of the destrier, the great warhorse. A creature bred specifically for power, for courage, and for the ability to carry the immense weight of an armored man into the heart of a chaotic fray. In the cool shadows of the stable, the knight finds his primary mount. The horse is a massive animal. A wall of muscle and bone covered in a sleek coat of bay or midnight black. It recognizes the knight's scent and the metallic clatter of his approach, letting out a low resonant nicker that vibrates in the timber rafters above. The knight reaches out a gauntlet hand to stroke the animal's velvet nose. There is a profound wordless partnership here. On the battlefield, the horse is not merely a transport, not just something to ride. It is a weapon, a living extension of the knight's own will. The horse's training is as rigorous as the man's. It's a long process of desensitization to the sights and sounds of war. The screaming of men, the clashing of steel, and the blinding glint of sunlight on polished shields. The squire and the grooms begin the process of tacking up. This is another slow, methodical ritual. First comes the heavy wool blanket to protect the horse's skin from chafing, followed by the high-backed war saddle. Unlike the shallow saddles used for travel, the war saddle is a deep, wooden-framed cradle designed to lock the knight into place. It features a high cantle at the rear and a sturdy pommel at the front, ensuring that even under the massive impact of a lance strike, the knight remains seated. The girths are pulled tight. The leather groans under the strain. The knight watches every buckle carefully, because his life depends on the integrity of this leather. Next comes the horse's own armor, the barding. Plates of steel or thick, boiled leather are fitted over the horse's head. That's called the chanfron. And over its chest, the pectoral. These pieces are etched with the same heraldry that adorns the knight's own surcoat, creating a unified image of power. As the bit is slipped into the horse's mouth and the reins are checked, the energy in the stable shifts. The horse senses the coming exertion. Its hooves shift restlessly on the straw-covered floor. The knight mounts with a heavy, metallic grunt. It's a feat of strength and balance to swing a leg encased in plate and mail over the high back of the saddle. Once seated, he feels the immense power of the animal beneath him. He is now 7 feet tall from the ground, a titan of iron and flesh. He gathers the reins, and the horse walks out of the stable and into the bright, dust-choked air of the tilt yard. The tilt yard is a long, rectangular stretch of churned earth, located just outside the inner curtain wall. At its center stands the barrier, a long wooden fence designed to keep the horses separated during a charge. At one end, several squires and men-at-arms are preparing the targets. The most important of these is the quinton. That's a rotating wooden crossbar with a flat shield on one end and a heavy sandbag or lead weight on the other. The goal is simple but treacherous. Hit the shield with the point of the lance and ride past quickly enough to avoid being struck in the back of the head by the swinging weight. The knight takes a practice lance from his squire. For training, the lance is made of ash or fir. Heavy and long, but tipped with a coronal, a blunt, crown-shaped head designed to spread the impact rather than pierce. He tucks the butt of the lance under his right arm, resting the shaft in the rest that's bolted to his breastplate. The weight is substantial. It pulls at his shoulder and requires a steady core to keep the point from dipping downward. He looks down the length of the wood. The tip of the lance sways slightly with the movement of the horse beneath him. He begins with a slow trot. The world begins to blur at the edges of his vision as he focuses entirely on the wooden shield of the quinton. He feels the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the horse's hooves, a heartbeat that he must synchronize with his own. As he nears the target, he spurs the horse into a gallop. The sound changes from a trot to a thunderous roar. The wind whistles through the icelets of his helmet. The world narrows to a single point of wood ahead of him. At the moment of impact, the knight braces his legs against the stirrups and his back against the high cantle of the saddle. The lance strikes the shield with a bone-jarring crack. The wood shatters or the quinton spins violently on its axis. The knight ducks his head, feeling the rush of air as the sandbag whistles inches above his helmet. He wheels the horse around at the far end of the yard, breathing hard. The interior of his helmet is growing hot and humid with his breath. This is the discipline of the tilt. The constant, exhausting repetition of the charge. Between runs, the knight works on his horsemanship. He practices the volti and the caracole, specialized maneuvers, forcing the massive destrier to move with the agility of a cat. He guides the horse with his knees and his weight, leaving his hands free to manage the lance and the shield. This is the height of medieval martial art. The total fusion of man and beast. The squire brings a fresh lance and the process begins again. Each charge is a lesson in physics. The calculation of speed. The angle of the point. And the timing of the strike. The heat of the afternoon sun beats down on the steel plates. And the knight begins to feel the true weight of his vocation. His muscles ache. The sweat stings his eyes beneath the padding of his cap. But there is no room for fatigue here. In the tilt yard, as on the battlefield, hesitation is a death sentence. He looks toward the next target, a small brass ring hanging from a crossbar. This requires even greater precision. He must catch the ring on the very tip of his lance while moving at a full gallop. It's a test of focus and a steady hand. A reminder that the knight is not just a blunt instrument, but a precision weapon. As the first hour of training draws to a close, the air in the tilt yard is thick with the dust kicked up by the horse's hooves. The knight's breathing is heavy and rhythmic, a mirror to the horse's own heaving flanks. He pauses for a moment, letting the horse walk in circles to cool down gradually. He watches his younger squires practicing with wooden swords against a pell, that's a stout wooden post. Their movements are eager but unrefined. Clumsy even. He shouts a word of correction, his voice muffled but authoritative through the steel of his visor. This too is his duty. To ensure that the next generation is ready to take up the burden of the steel. The second hour of training shifts from the momentum of the lance to the grinding, close-quarters exhaustion of the sword and mace. The knight dismounts. His boots hit the churned earth with a heavy, muffled thud. His legs feel momentarily light, a strange sensation after being locked into the high-backed saddle for so long. The squire approaches quickly, taking the horse's reins and offering a leather flask of watered wine. The knight lifts his visor. The sudden influx of fresh air feels like a cold drenching of water over his face. His face is flushed. His hair is plastered to his forehead with sweat. But the discipline of the yard allows for only a brief respite. Just a moment. He moves toward the pell, a thick post of oak sunk deep into the ground, standing roughly the height of a man. The pell is a silent, unyielding opponent. It does not move. It does not tire. And it does not feel pain. For the knight, it is the canvas upon which he paints his martial skill. He draws his practice sword, a heavy, blunt iron bar that mimics the weight and balance of his warblade but lacks the lethal edge. The training is not about speed alone, you see. It is about the economy of motion. Every strike must be delivered from the core of the body, using the weight of the armor itself to add power to the blow. The knight begins a series of repetitive strikes. Overhand. Diagonal. Horizontal. The sound of the iron hitting the oak is a rhythmic, percussive thwack that echoes against the castle walls. He works on the moulinet, a circular motion of the wrist that generates massive centrifugal force. With each hit, he imagines the vulnerabilities in an opponent's harness. The gaps at the armpit. The joints of the visor. The thin steel of the gorget at the throat. He moves around the post, his feet dancing in a heavy, measured shuffle. In the heat of battle, footing is everything. To slip in the mud is to die. He focuses on his center of gravity, feeling the way the plate and mail shift with his weight. Learning to make the armor work with him rather than against him. As the training progresses, the squire steps in to act as a partner for harness fecton. That's combat in armor. This is a game of leverage and geometry. When two men are encased in steel, a simple sword cut is rarely effective. Instead, they practice half-swording, gripping the middle of the blade with a gauntlet hand to turn the sword into a short spear or a lever. They grapple. The sound of their breastplates clashing together is like the tolling of a great, cracked bell. They work on trips and throws, seeking to bring the opponent to the ground where a dagger can find the gaps in the armor. The physical exertion is immense. Within the steel, the temperature rises until it feels like a furnace. The breath comes in short, ragged gasps, and the world becomes a blur of gray steel and brown earth. The knight's muscles begin to scream with fatigue. The weight of the shield on his left arm feels as though it has doubled, tripled even. Yet this is precisely where the discipline lies. A knight must be able to fight when his heart is bursting and his limbs are leaden, when everything in his body is telling him to stop. He pushes through the exhaustion, focusing on the mechanical precision of his parries. He watches the squire's movements, correcting the young man's stance even as he defends against a flurry of blows. This is a shared suffering, a bonding through the shared language of violence and endurance. Finally, the training draws to a close as the sun begins to touch the tops of the western battlements. The knight signals an end to the session. He stands still for a moment, leaning on his practiced sword. His chest is heaving. The dust of the tilt-yard has coated his armor in a fine ochre film, turning the polished steel into a dull, weathered gray. The squire begins the process of down-arming, loosening the straps of the helmet and removing the gauntlets. The knight's hands are shaking slightly from the vibration of the strikes against the pell, a testament to the thousands of pounds of force he has exerted over the last 2 hours. He looks back at the tilt-yard. The earth is torn and scarred. The quinton is still swaying slightly in the breeze, and the pell is notched and battered. It's a scene of quiet devastation, really, a reflection of the energy spent. This training is the insurance policy of the realm. Every drop of sweat shed here is a drop of blood saved on the day of battle. The knight feels a profound sense of weariness, but it is a good weariness. The satisfaction of a body pushed to its limits and a mind sharpened by the constant contemplation of combat. As he walks back toward the keep, the horse grooms are already busy rubbing down the destrier. The steam rises from the animal's back in the cooling air. The knight watches the horse for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of their shared labor. The discipline of the tilt is over for today. The warrior is exhausted, but the knight is ready. He moves toward the washhouse. The heavy clatter of his footsteps is now slower and more deliberate, marking the transition from the violence of the afternoon to the cooling shadows of the evening. Section 6, The Afternoon Hunt. The clamor of the tilt-yard, with its ringing steel and thunderous hooves, begins to dissolve into a memory as the knight moves toward the cooling shadows of the gatehouse. The transition from the martial exercises of the afternoon to the ritual of the hunt is not merely a change of location. It's a fundamental shift in the knight's state of being. To hunt is to engage in the image of war. Yet it's a pursuit governed by the quietude of the natural world rather than the cacophony of the battlefield. As the sun begins its long, slow lean toward the western ridges, the knight prepares to enter the forest. That vast, shadowed cathedral of oak, ash, and thorn that serves as both a larder for the castle and a sacred training ground for the soul. The first step in this transition is the unarming of the warrior and the arming of the hunter. In the quiet of the stableyard, the squire works with a focused, rhythmic speed to loosen the heavy buckles of the plate armor. The breastplate is removed, and for the first time since the morning mass, the knight feels the true weight of the air against his linen shirt. The removal of the greaves and the vambraces is a physical relief that borders on the spiritual. His limbs feel light, almost buoyant. The restriction of the steel is replaced by the suppleness of leather. He dons a hunting tunic of thick, forest green wool, a garment that has been treated with wax to repel the damp of the thicket. Over this, he pulls on boots of soft, oiled deerskin that reach mid-thigh, allowing him to move through the undergrowth with a silence that iron could never afford. The equipment of the hunt is a collection of tactile wonders, each piece designed for a specific interaction with the wilderness. The knight checks his hunting sword, a shorter, sturdier blade than his long sword, designed for the coup de grace, in dense brush where a longer weapon would be hindered by branches. He slides it into a scabbard of boiled leather. The fit is snug and silent. Then there is the spear, a massive shaft of seasoned ash, topped with a broad, leaf-shaped head of tempered steel. He runs a gloved hand down the wood, feeling the grain and the slight irregularities of the hand-hewn shaft. It's a grounding weight, a vertical anchor in a world of horizontal shadows. As the knight prepares his person, The yard around him becomes a symphony of canine anticipation. The hounds are the true protagonists of this hour. There are the great Alants, heavy-jawed and muscular, held on thick leather leashes by the kennel masters. Their breathing is a low, rhythmic huffing. And their eyes are fixed on the gate, sensing the coming freedom of the woods. Beside them are the Ratches, the scent hounds. Smaller and more nervous, their noses constantly twitching as they sample the shifting currents of the air. The sound of their paws, a dry, frantic scratching against the cobblestones, creates a backdrop of kinetic energy. The huntsman is a man whose skin has been tanned to the color of old oak by decades of outdoor labor. He moves among them with a low, guttural language of whistles and clicks. There is no shouting here. The hunt requires a harmony of purpose that begins in the silence of the bailey. The choice of the horse is equally deliberate. The great destrier, that mountain of muscle used in the tilt, is led back to the cool darkness of the stable to rest. In its place, the squire brings forward a hunter, a swifter, leaner animal with a keen eye and a steady temperament. This horse doesn't need to charge through a wall of pikes. It needs to navigate the treacherous, root-choked floor of an ancient forest without faltering. The knight mounts with a fluid ease that was impossible in his plate armor. He feels the warmth of the horse through the thinner leather of his hunting saddle. A more intimate connection than the rigid wooden cradle of the war saddle. He gathers the reins. And with a soft click of his tongue, the party begins its slow procession out of the castle. Leaving the fortress is like shedding a skin. As they pass through the shadow of the portcullis and cross the wooden bridge, the temperature seems to drop by several degrees. The air loses the metallic, smoky tang of the bailey and takes on the scent of the living earth. Damp moss, rotting leaves, and the sharp, clean perfume of pine resin. The world outside the walls is a sea of undulating green. A wilderness that looks deceptively peaceful in the golden light of the late afternoon. The knight looks back one last time at the gray stone towers of his home, seeing them now as a small man-made island in a vast primordial ocean of trees. The entrance into the forest eaves is a moment of profound sensory immersion. The sunlight, which had been a broad, golden flood in the open fields, is suddenly shattered into 1,000 flickering shards as it hits the canopy. This dappled light creates a shifting, hallucinatory landscape where nothing is quite what it seems. A gnarled branch looks like the antler of a stag. A patch of dark moss looks like the flank of a boar. The knight's eyes, trained for the broad movements of the battlefield, must now adjust to the microscopic details of the thicket. He watches the way the ferns bow under the weight of a passing breeze, and the way the birds fall silent in a specific sector of the woods, signaling the movement of something large and hidden. The party moves at a walk. A slow, rhythmic thump-thump of hooves on the loamy soil. In this part of the afternoon they are in the questing phase. The huntsman leads the way on foot, accompanied by a single limer, a specialized scent hound on a long silk leash. This is the most meditative part of the day. There is no chase yet. Only the patient, painstaking search for the few that's droppings, or the broken twigs that indicate the presence of a heart of grease. A prime, fat stag. The knight watches the huntsman's back, noting the way the man pauses to examine a patch of disturbed earth or to sniff the air near a stream. In the medieval mind, the forest is a book, and the huntsman is the one who knows how to read its most difficult passages. As they move deeper, the silence of the woods becomes a physical presence. It's not a total absence of sound, but a layer of small, overlapping noises that emphasize the stillness. You hear the rhythmic creak-creak of the leather saddles, the soft jingle of the hounds' collars, and the occasional sharp snap of a dry twig under a horse's hoof. Overhead, the wind sighs through the high branches of the beeches, a sound like the distant breaking of waves on a shore. The knight finds his own breathing slowing to match the pace of the forest. The stresses of the morning, the legal disputes, the grain accounts, the political tensions, feel as though they belong to another lifetime. In the woods, The only thing that matters is the present moment and the direction of the wind. The knight considers the specific geography of his forest. To the north lies the high wood, where the oaks are so ancient that their lowest branches are as thick as the trunks of lesser trees. This is a place of deep shadows and hidden ravines, where the ground is always damp and the air is always cool. To the south is the heath, a more open expanse of gorse and broom where the sunlight is stronger and the deer come to graze in the early evening. Between them lies the bottoms, a marshy stretch of land where the streams gather before flowing toward the river in the valley. The knight knows every ridge and every hollow of this land. It's a map etched into his memory through years of pursuit. They reach a small clearing where a brook cuts through the gray limestone. The water is clear and cold, bubbling over smooth pebbles with a melodic gurgle splat that seems to amplify the quiet of the glade. The knight signals for the party to pause. He dismounts. His boots make a soft, muffled sound on the bed of moss. He leads his horse to the water's edge, watching as the animal drinks with a steady, rhythmic gulp-pause gulp. He bends down and scoops a handful of the water to his own lips. It's shockingly cold, tasting of minerals and the deep, dark heart of the mountain. In this moment of stillness, the knight feels a sense of profound equilibrium. He is a part of the landscape, a predator in a world of prey, but a predator who respects the ancient laws of the chase. The huntsman approaches, his face a mask of concentration. He has found slots, the footprints of a stag, near the muddy bank of the brook. He points them out to the knight. His finger traces the shape of the hoof in the black soil. The slots are wide and deep, indicating a heavy, mature animal. The knight leans down to look, noting the way the heels of the print are worn, a sign of age and wisdom in the beast. This is the moment when the quest begins to sharpen into a find. The atmosphere of the party shifts instantly. The hounds, sensing the change in their masters, become more alert. Their tails begin to flag back and forth in a rhythmic, expectant motion. The knight mounts his horse once more. His movements now more deliberate and focused. The slow, wandering pace of the early afternoon is replaced by a sense of directed intent. They begin to follow the trail, moving in a single file through a dense thicket of holly and hawthorn. The branches swish against the horse's flanks, a sound that would be startling if not for the steady, hypnotic rhythm of the march. The knight keeps his spear ready, the steel head glinting in the dying light. He is no longer just a man on a ride. He is a hunter on the verge of the chase. As they climb a gentle rise, the trees begin to thin, revealing the vast, golden expanse of the upper glade. The sun is now a glowing ember on the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows that stretch for hundreds of yards across the tall grass. The air here is warmer, smelling of sun-baked hay and wild thyme. It's in this transitional space, the boundary between the deep forest and the open glade, that the stag is most likely to be found. The knight halts his horse at the edge of the trees, staying within the shadows. He scans the horizon, his eyes narrowing against the glare of the setting sun. And then he sees it. A movement at the far end of the glade, near a stand of silver birches. A flash of tawny brown against the green. And then the unmistakable silhouette of antlers rising like the branches of a winter tree. The stag is there. A silent, majestic figure at the edge of the world. It's a heart of 10. That means 10 points on its antlers, exactly as the tracks had promised. For a long, breathless minute, no one moves. The only sound is the soft, rhythmic breathing of the horses and the distant, lonely caw of a raven overhead. The knight feels his heart begin to beat a little faster. A steady, pulsing drum in his chest. The quest is over. The find is complete. Now and only now does the true afternoon hunt begin. The visual of the stag, frozen against the bleeding gold of the horizon, marks the end of the patient silence and the birth of the chase. The knight remains perfectly still. His hands steady on the reins, allowing the image to settle into his mind. In the medieval hunt, this is the unharboring. The stag, sensing the predatory gaze from the shadows of the forest eaves, tosses its head. Its antlers catch the final horizontal rays of the sun like a crown of burning brass. Then, with a sudden fluid explosion of muscle, the beast turns and vanishes into the tall grass of the upper glade. The knight signals to the huntsman, and the long-held breath of the party is finally released. The huntsman brings the horn to his lips and sounds a series of short, urgent notes. The moot. The sound is sharp and brassy, tearing through the quietude of the evening and echoing off the gray stone ridges of the nearby hills. In response, the kennel masters release the pack. The Alants and Ratches, held in check for so long, erupt into a sea of moving fur and baying voices. This is the cry of the hounds. A sound that is both terrifying and musical. A rhythmic, descending scale of yelps and deep, resonant bellows that signals the blood is up. The knight spurs his hunter into a gallop, and the slow, meditative pace of the afternoon is instantly replaced by a blur of kinetic energy. The transition is jarring. A sudden rush of wind against his face that carries the sharp scent of crushed wildflowers and the metallic tang of the horse's bit. He leans low, his body becoming one with the motion of the horse. The thump-thump-thump of the hooves on the firm turf of the glade is a heavy, driving percussion. He feels the power of the animal beneath him. The rhythmic bunching and stretching of its shoulders. The heat of its exertion rising through the saddle. This is the chase. The heart of the night's afternoon, where the skills of the tilt yard are applied to the unpredictable terrain of the wild. They fly across the glade. The long shadows of the trees appear to race alongside them. The knight's eyes are fixed on the white scut, the tail, of the stag as it bobs through the golden grass. The world has narrowed once more. But unlike the thin slit of the helmet's visor, this vision is wide and panoramic. He must navigate the hidden hazards of the meadow. The rabbit holes. The sudden dips in the ground. The patches of slick, marshy soil. All while maintaining his speed. He guides the horse with his knees, his hands steadying the heavy ash spear. Every muscle in his core is engaged, countering the violent, undulating rhythm of the gallop. The stag leads them out of the open glade and back into a dense thicket of blackthorn and holly. The transition is a sudden plunge into shadow. The knight must raise his arm to shield his face from the whipping branches. The leather of his tunic makes a scratching sound against the thorns. The sound of the chase changes here. The open, rolling thunder of the hooves is replaced by a chaotic crashing of brush and the sharp, snapping report of dry wood breaking under the weight of the horses. The air is thick with the smell of disturbed earth and the pungent, musky odor of the deer's sweat, its scent, a trail so fresh it feels like a physical presence in the humid air. Deep in the thicket, the stag attempts to double, to turn back on its own tracks to confuse the scent of the hounds. The knight slows his horse. His breathing is heavy and rhythmic, matching the heaving flanks of the animal. He listens. The hounds have fallen momentarily silent, their noses working the foil, the place where the stag has crossed and recrossed its path. This is a moment of high tension. A test of the hunter's patience. The knight watches the lead rake, a grizzled old hound with a scarred ear, as it circles a patch of ferns. The dog lets out a single, triumphant whimper howl. And the pack is off again. The knight wheels his horse. The hooves kick up clods of dark, rich loam. And the chase resumes. The sun has now dipped entirely below the horizon, leaving the forest in a state of crepuscular light. That's twilight, a bruised purple and deep indigo that makes distances difficult to judge. The knight feels the cooling of the air. The damp mistiness rising from the forest floor, clinging to the horse's legs like spectral water. He follows the sound of the hounds through a narrow ravine where the limestone walls are slick with moisture and green with ancient liverworts. The sound of the chase is amplified here. The baying of the dogs reflects off the stone until it sounds like a phantom pack of 100 voices. The stag is nearing the water leap, a place where the forest stream widens into a deep, dark pool beneath a canopy of weeping willows. As the night breaks through the final screen of hazel, he sees the stag in the water. The beast is at bay. Its back to a massive moss-covered rock. Its antlers lowered in a gesture of defiant, last-stand bravery. The hounds circle the pool. Their voices a frenzied, chaotic roar. But they don't yet dare to close in on the lethal points of the stag's crown. The knight dismounts. His boots make a wet, sucking squelch in the muddy bank. He feels the weight of the moment. The end of the chase. The final transition from the pursuit to the harvest. He approaches the water's edge. His hunting spear held low and steady. The stag's eyes are wide, reflecting the faint, silvery light of the first stars. There is a profound, heavy silence that falls between the knight and the beast. A moment of mutual recognition that exists beneath the noise of the hounds. This is the death of the heart. A ritualized conclusion that must be handled with the dignity befitting a noble quarry. The knight moves with a slow, deliberate step. The mud clings to his deerskin boots. He finds his footing, braces his back, and delivers the coup de grace. It's a quick, clean end. A finality that honors the struggle of the afternoon. The break of the deer follows. A methodical, traditional process of preparing the meat and rewarding the hounds. The knight watches as the huntsman performs the essay, testing the fat of the breast. The best portions are set aside for the high table of the evening feast. While the hounds are given the quarry, the offal and scraps placed upon the hide. The sound of the hounds feeding is a rhythmic, wet, tearing and crunching. A primal noise that underscores the reality of the food chain. The knight feels a deep, settling exhaustion in his limbs. A good tiredness that reaches into his very bones. The return to the castle is a slow, somber procession through the gloaming. The take, the kill, is loaded onto the pack horses. The weight of the carcasses causes the leather straps to creak in a steady, hypnotic cadence. They move through the blackwood once more. But now the forest is a place of peace rather than a theater of war. The knight wraps his heavy wool cloak around his shoulders. The fabric smells of wood smoke, wet horse and the cold, clean air of the night. He listens to the rhythmic clop-clop of the hooves on the road. A sound that feels like a heartbeat against the silence of the landscape. As the gray stone towers of the keep loom out of the darkness, their windows now glowing with the warm, buttery light of torches and candles, the knight feels the pull of the hearth. The gates of the bailey swing open with a low, metallic groan. And the party enters the courtyard. The transition from the wild to the civilized is complete. The afternoon hunt has provided the meat for the table, the exercise for the body, and the quietude for the soul. The knight stands for a moment in the center of the yard, looking up at the rising moon, before turning toward the great hall. The day's labor is done, and the warmth of the feast awaits. Section 7, The Evening Feast. The transition from the cool, damp silence of the forest to the vibrant, sensory eruption of the great hall is the final great shift of the night's waking day. As the heavy oak doors of the keep swing inward, the night is met with a wall of warmth that carries the intoxicating, complex perfume of a medieval household at its peak. It's a thick, layering scent. The sharp, resinous tang of burning pine torches. The savory, mouth-watering aroma of roasting venison dripping into the flames. The sweet, cloying smell of mulled wine spiced with cinnamon and cloves. And the underlying earthy base of fresh rushes and lavender strewn across the floor. This is the hour of the hearth. The reward for the iron discipline of the morning and the grueling exertion of the afternoon. The knight moves first to his chamber to undergo a final transformation. The leather hunting gear, stained with the salt of sweat and the dark loam of the woods, is stripped away by the squire. In its place, the knight dons the finery of his station. Garments that are designed not for protection or utility, but for the display of wealth, lineage, and grace. He pulls on a tunic of deep, heavy samite. That's a rich silken fabric woven with gold thread that catches the candlelight in a shimmering, liquid dance. Over this he wears a long, flowing surcoat of scarlet wool, lined with the soft, white fur of winter ermine. The weight of this clothing is different from the weight of armor. It's a comforting, regal burden that forces a slow, measured gait. Around his neck he settles a heavy gold chain, each link a testament to the favors of his lord and the longevity of his house. He returns to the great hall, which has been transformed for the evening. The long, low trestle tables that were used for the simple morning meal have been covered with cloths of fine, bleached linen, so white they seem to glow in the amber light. At the far end of the hall, the high table sits upon its raised dais, a stage for the castle's inner circle. The knight takes his place in a chair of carved walnut, its back reaching toward the smoky rafters. From this elevation, he looks down upon the assembled household, the men-at-arms, the visiting pilgrims, the local clergy, and the favored servants. The hall is a microcosm of the feudal world, a hierarchy made visible through the arrangement of seats and the quality of the light. The lighting itself is a masterpiece of atmospheric design. Tall beeswax candles, precious and pale, stand in silver-branched candelabra upon the high table, their flames steady and bright. Along the walls, iron cressets hold thick torches of pitched wood, which flicker and spit, casting long dancing shadows that play across the faded tapestries. The fire in the central hearth is a roaring mountain of oak logs, sending a constant stream of golden sparks swirling up toward the louvre in the roof. That's the opening at the top. This shifting, living light softens the hard edges of the stone walls and turns the faces of the guests into a gallery of amber-hued portraits. There is no harshness here, only the soft, rhythmic pulsing of the firelight. The feast begins not with food but with water. In a continuation of the morning's ritual, a procession of young pages moves among the guests carrying silver basins and ewers of warmed water scented with rose petals or mint. The knight dips his hands into the bowl. The water feels silk-smooth against his skin, a final cleansing of the day's toil. He dries his hands on a towel of fine diapered linen, the texture a subtle luxury. This act of washing is a communal signal that the business of the day is truly dead, and the pleasure of the night has begun. The first course, the entree, is announced by a flourish of trumpets from the minstrel's gallery, a bright, brassy sound that cuts through the low hum of conversation. The servants emerge from the kitchens in a steady, rhythmic line, carrying heavy silver chargers laden with the first offerings. There are frumenty pots, a thick, golden porridge of cracked wheat boiled in almond milk and colored with expensive saffron, studded with dried currants and pieces of venison. There are small, delicate pastries known as coffins, filled with minced herbs and the meat of small birds. The knight uses his spoon, carved from translucent horn, to sample the frumenty. The taste is a complex layering of sweetness and earth. The saffron leaves a lingering, exotic warmth on the palate. As the first course is cleared, the minstrels begin their evening's labor. The music of the feast is designed to be a background tapestry, a slow and melodic accompaniment to the rhythm of the meal. A lutenist plucks at the strings of his instrument. The notes fall through the air like drops of liquid silver. Beside him, a flute player breathes a soft, haunting melody that seems to mimic the sighing of the wind in the forest. The music is not meant to be intrusive. It's a tether for the mind, a way to prevent the conversation from becoming too boisterous or the silence from becoming too heavy. The knight leans back in his chair, his eyes half closed, letting the cadence of the lute settle his pulse. The conversation at the high table is a slow-moving river of news and courtly pleasantries. They speak of the day's hunt, recounting the bravery of the stag and the stamina of the hounds. They discuss the quality of the new wine arrived from the south, and the rumors of a tournament to be held in the neighboring duchy during the coming summer. This is the soft power of the knight, the ability to navigate the social currents of his peers with the same steady hand he uses to guide a horse. He speaks in a low, measured tone, his voice carrying the authority of his office but tempered by the hospitality of the host. The second course, the main, is the centerpiece of the evening's theater. The great hall falls into a respectful hush as the master of the kitchen leads a procession carrying the great meats. At the center is a massive wild boar's head, its tusks polished and its mouth holding a bright red apple, surrounded by garlands of rosemary and bay. Following it are the haunches of the stag from the afternoon hunt, roasted to a deep, glistening brown and basted in a sauce of red wine and crushed pepper. The smell is overwhelming. A rich, primal aroma of salt, fat, and fire that speaks to the very heart of the medieval appetite. The knight watches as the carver, a young noble in training, approaches the meat with a set of long, slender knives. The carving is a ritual of precision, a dance of steel and sinew. Each slice is laid onto a fresh trencher of bread. The juices soak into the dough and turn it into a flavorful, heavy sponge. The knight receives his portion with a nod of acknowledgement. He uses his personal knife, the one with the handle of polished ebony, to cut the meat into manageable pieces. The venison is tender, tasting of the wild herbs of the forest and the long, slow heat of the spit. It's the literal consumption of the day's labor, a physical manifestation of his dominance over the landscape. To accompany the meat, there are dishes of compote, pears and apples slow-cooked in honey and wine until they're soft and translucent. There are salads, of bitter greens and wild onions, dressed in verjuice and nut oil to cut through the richness of the fat. The knight eats slowly, savoring the contrasts of flavor and texture. In the medieval world, the feast is a slow-moving spectacle, a marathon of the senses rather than a sprint. There is no rush to reach the end. The goal is to inhabit the moment, to let the warmth of the fire and the richness of the food create a buffer against the cold, dark world that waits beyond the castle walls. Between the bites of food, the knight sips from a heavy goblet of spiced piment. The wine is dark and thick, flavored with a secret blend of spices: pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and galangal, sweetened with the finest forest honey. It's a potent, warming brew that sends a slow, creeping heat through the limbs, loosening the last remnants of tension in his shoulders. He looks down at the lower tables, seeing the flickering candlelight reflected in the eyes of his men. There is a sense of profound security in this room, a collective understanding that for this night at least the walls are strong, the larder is full, and the Lord is just. As the second course nears its conclusion, the master of the revels signals for a brief interlude. A storyteller steps into the circle of light near the hearth. He's an old man with a voice like the grinding of millstones, and he begins to recount a chanson de geste, a song of great deeds. He tells of ancient heroes, of knights who fought dragons in the mist and giants in the mountains. The story is familiar, a narrative thread that connects the knight to the legendary past of his order. The hall grows silent. The only sounds are the crackle of the fire and the steady rhythmic breathing of the listeners. The knight watches the flames. His mind drifts into the story. The boundary between the myth and his own reality begins to blur in the golden haze of the feast. The storyteller's voice fades into the high vaulted shadows of the rafters, leaving a lingering resonance that seems to vibrate within the very stones of the hall. As the third and final course, the issue or the dessert, is prepared, the atmosphere in the great hall undergoes a subtle mellowing shift. The frantic energy of the day and the robust hunger of the main course have been satiated, replaced by a heavy, comfortable languor. This is the hour of the subtleties, a medieval tradition of culinary art where the kitchen staff demonstrates its most whimsical and intricate skills. The pages return to the high table, their movements now slower and more fluid in the dimming light. They carry silver platters of celery, a delicate jelly flavored with rosewater and shaped into the likeness of heraldic lions and castle keeps. Beside these are bowls of dragées, spiced seeds and nuts coated in a thick, hard shell of sugar, shimmering like small, edible jewels. The knight reaches for a handful of sugared almonds. The crisp snap of the sugar shell is a sharp, satisfying sound against the low hum of the room. The sweetness is a stark contrast to the savory, metallic tang of the venison. A final, indulgent layer to the day's sensory map. The masterpiece of the evening is brought forward. A subtlety made of sculpted marzipan and spun sugar, representing the very castle in which they sit. It's a marvel of temporary architecture, complete with tiny banners and sugar paste knights standing guard on the battlements. This is more than food. It's a symbol of the knight's mastery over his domain. A sweet, fragile representation of the strength that surrounds them. The knight breaks off a piece of a marzipan tower. The almond paste melts on his tongue. Its texture smooth and dense. This final act of consumption is a metaphorical sealing of the day's duties. As the dregs of the wine are poured, the music shifts from the bright, melodic lute to the deeper, more melancholic tones of the viol, a medieval fiddle. The player draws the bow across the strings in a slow, mournful cadence that reflects the dying of the light. The sound is thick and resinous, echoing the feeling of the heavy silk against the knight's skin. The conversations at the lower tables have dropped to a low, rhythmic murmur, like the sound of a distant sea. Men lean their heads together in the shadows. Their laughter now quiet and private. The camaraderie of the hearth having replaced the hierarchy of the yard. The knight looks down at his hands resting on the white linen of the table. They're clean now. The dirt of the hunt and the grease of the meal washed away. But he can still feel the ghost of the sword grip and the tension of the reins in his palms. He feels a profound sense of stasis. A moment of perfect balance where the past actions of the day are fully reconciled with the rest of the night. The warmth of the hall has seeped into his bones, acting as a balm for the aches of the tilt yard. He is surrounded by the people he protects and the walls he maintains. And in this moment the feudal contract feels solid and unbreakable. The fire in the central hearth has begun to burn down. The great logs having crumbled into a glowing, pulsing mountain of white ash and deep orange embers. Every so often, a pocket of sap in the wood will pop and hiss, sending a lonely spark spiraling upward like a dying star. The shadows in the hall have grown longer and more dominant, reclaiming the corners of the room from the flickering torches. The tapestries on the walls, depicting the long history of the realm, seem to move and breathe in the shifting light. The ancestors nodding in silent approval of the knight's stewardship. The final ritual of the feast is the voidee, the departure of the Lord. The knight rises from his walnut chair. The movement slow and dignified. As he stands, the entire hall rises with him. The sound of stools scraping against the stone floor is a sudden collective rush that echoes in the rafters. He offers a final nod of acknowledgement to his household, a gesture of thanks and protection. He takes a small silver goblet of clar, a spiced wine used as a digestive, and drains it in a single warming draught. The liquid is hot with ginger and long pepper, a final fire to carry him through the cooling corridors of the keep. He turns toward the private entrance of the solar. His squire steps forward with a fresh torch to light the way. The transition from the public spectacle of the hall to the private silence of the upper chambers is a gradual withdrawal. Behind him, the hall remains alive with the sounds of clearing, the rhythmic clatter of dishes being stacked, the low voices of the servants, and the final, fading notes of the viol. The warmth of the feast follows him like a cloak, a lingering aura of spice and smoke that buffers him against the chill of the stone staircase. As he climbs the spiral stairs, his footsteps are no longer the heavy, metallic strikes of the morning. They're the soft, muffled thud-thud of silk and fur against the stone. Each step takes him further away from the noise of the world and closer to the profound stillness of the night. The evening feast is over. Its purpose fulfilled. He has been fed. He has been honored. And he has reinforced the bonds of his community. Now the final hour of the day awaits. The hour of reflection. The hour of the watch. And the final descent into the restorative darkness of sleep. Section 8, The Night Watch. The transition from the vibrant, spice-scented warmth of the great hall to the high, windswept solitude of the battlements is the final, solemn crossing of the night's day. As the heavy oak door of the keep closes behind him, the chaotic symphony of the feast, the laughter, the clatter of silver, the melodic weeping of the vielle, is instantly swallowed by a silence so vast and ancient it feels like a physical weight. The air here, at the summit of the fortress, is a different element entirely. It's stripped of the smells of men and fire, tasting instead of the high atmosphere, the distant salt of the sea, and the cold, mineral breath of the mountain. It's a sharp, invigorating shock to the senses, clearing away the golden haze of the spiced wine and the heavy lethargy of the feast, returning the night to a state of crystalline alertness. The night moves with a slow, rhythmic gait along the chemin de ronde. That's the narrow stone walkway that crowns the curtain walls. His footsteps, now clad once more in sturdy leather boots, make a dull, echoing thud-thud against the cold masonry. The stone beneath his hands is rough and pitted by decades of frost and sun, a texture that feels like the very skin of the earth. To his left, the battlements rise in a series of rhythmic crenellations, the merlons providing solid protection, the embrasures offering narrow windows into the abyss of the night. He pauses at one of these openings, leaning his weight against the stone, and looks out over his world. Below him, the landscape is a sea of shifting shadows and silvery light. The moon, a pale and distant orb, has climbed high into the velvet indigo of the sky, casting a ghostly radiance that turns the familiar fields into an alien territory. The river in the valley is a ribbon of liquid mercury, snaking through the dark mass of the forest. Its rhythmic rush and hush, the only sound that reaches this height. The village at the foot of the hill is entirely dark. The tiny thatched cottages are huddled together like sleeping animals, their chimneys no longer breathing smoke. This is the hour of the first watch, the time when the night assumes his most fundamental role, the silent sentinel. In this stillness, the weight of his responsibility is most palpable. The thousands of lives sleeping beneath the shadow of these walls depend on the vigilance of the few who remain awake. The night is not alone in his watch. At regular intervals along the wall, he encounters the sentries, men-at-arms wrapped in heavy wool cloaks, their spears held upright like frozen lightning bolts in the moonlight. As he approaches, there's a soft, metallic clink-clatter as they shift their weight or adjust their grip. They do not speak. In the night watch, silence is the language of safety. A simple, slow nod of the head is exchanged, a rhythmic acknowledgement of shared duty. The night watches the way the torchlight from the lower bailey flickers against their iron helmets, creating a pulsing rhythm of light and shadow that mimics the slow heartbeat of the castle itself. He continues his circuit, moving toward the north tower, the highest point of the defenses. The wind here is stronger. A steady, low-frequency moan that vibrates through the stones and whistles through the arrow slits. It's a lonely, haunting sound, a reminder of the vastness of the world beyond the reach of the king's law. The night considers the geography of the darkness. Somewhere out there, beyond the silvered forest and the dark ridges, lie the territories of his rivals, the hidden camps of outlaws, and the wild, untamed places where the old gods are said still to linger. The night watch is a boundary work, a constant maintenance of the thin line between the order of the hearth and the chaos of the wilderness. He reaches the small circular chamber at the top of the tower, where a brazier of charcoal burns with a low, pulsing red glow. The smell of the charcoal is dry and sharp, a stark contrast to the damp smell of the night air. He stands by the fire for a moment. The heat radiates against his shins, the only sound being the crackle-pop of the fuel and the distant rhythmic caw of a night bird. He looks at the clepsydra. That's the water clock. It sits in a niche in the wall. The steady drip-drop-drip of the water from one vessel to the next is the only mechanical rhythm in this ancient place. A slow, liquid counting of the seconds that remain until the dawn. His thoughts drift, unhurried and fluid, as he stares into the embers. He reflects on the code of chivalry. Not as a list of abstract rules, but as a living, breathing commitment to this very moment. To be a knight is to be the one who stays awake so that others may dream. It's a vocation of vigilia, the constant, quiet alertness of the soul. He thinks of the vows he took in the candlelit chapel so many years ago, the weight of the sword on his shoulder, and the cold water of the ritual bath. In the silence of the tower, those memories feel as fresh as the night air. A narrative thread that ties his youth to his maturity and his duty to his faith. The knight moves back out onto the battlements. The cold air feels like a fresh drenching of water. He looks up at the stars. Those celestial fires that the scholars say are the navigation lights of the angels. They're bright and steady, arranged in the ancient patterns of the constellations. The Great Bear, the Hunter, the Dragon. The knight knows these patterns well. They've been his companions on long marches and late-night vigils throughout his life. Their slow rhythmic rotation across the sky is a reminder of the great chain of being. The divine order that places him here on this stone wall, in this specific hour of the world's history. He reaches the western gatehouse, where the heavy chains of the portcullis hang in the darkness like the guts of some great iron beast. He listens to the rhythmic slap-slap of the water in the moat far below, a sound that is both soothing and alien. Every so often, a fish will break the surface, creating a series of widening silver ripples that catch the moon's light before vanishing back into the blackness. The knight finds himself matching his own breathing to the rhythm of the water, his pulse slowing, his mind entering a state of contemplative readiness. He's not tired. Not yet. He's in the white space of the night, where the ego dissolves and only the duty remains. As the first hour of the watch draws to a close, he hears the distant, muffled sound of the changing of the guard. It's a series of rhythmic, metallic signals. The strike of a staff on stone. The low murmur of the password. The clank-clink of mail as the tired men descend and the fresh men rise. This is the heartbeat of the fortress. The constant, cyclical renewal of its vigilance. The knight remains at his post, a stationary point in this moving world. He is the witness to the transition, the one who carries the memory of the light into the depths of the dark. The middle of the night brings a depth of silence that is almost tactile, a heavy velvet curtain that settles over the stones and the soul. The knight continues his slow rhythmic circuit of the battlements. His shadow stretches and shrinks in the flickering torchlight of the wall cressets. The air has grown even colder. A dry, crystalline frost is beginning to form on the iron railings and the rough edges of the stone. He watches the way his breath plumes in the air. A rhythmic, ghostly cloud that vanishes into the indigo dark. This is the hour of the wolf. The deepest part of the night when the boundary between the living world and the world of spirits is said to be thinnest. He pauses at the south bastion, which overlooks the silent forest he traversed only hours ago. The woods are now a solid, impenetrable mass of black. The treetops sway in the night wind with a sound like the distant roaring of a furnace. This is the sighing of the timber. A low-frequency vibration that he feels in his chest as much as he hears in his ears. Every so often, the cry of a screech owl pierces the darkness. A sharp, shivering shriek in hollow, that ripples through the air like a stone dropped into a still pond. The knight doesn't flinch. He has learned to read the sounds of the night as a map of safety. A sudden silence among the crickets or the abrupt cessation of the owl's call would be a signal of movement. A warning of something untoward. But tonight the rhythms are natural and steady. His mind begins to drift toward the final ritual of the day, the descent into sleep. He considers the paradox of his life. A man of war who seeks the peace of the hearth. A man of iron who sleeps in linen. The transition from the high, cold vigilance of the watch back to the warm, enclosed sanctuary of the solar is the final journey of his 24-hour cycle. He looks toward the keep, seeing the faint, dying glow of the fire behind the narrow windows of his chamber. The night watch is not just a duty of protection. It's a purgation. The cold air and the solitude have stripped away the vanity of the feast and the aggression of the tilt-yard, leaving him hollow and ready for the restorative little death of slumber. He makes his final report to the captain of the watch at the gatehouse. The exchange is brief and whispered. A few words on the wind. The passing of the watchword. And the acknowledgement of a quiet night. The knight then turns and begins the long walk back across the inner bailey. The courtyard is a space of immense shadows. The fountain in the center drips with a rhythmic plink-plunk cadence. The water catches a stray beam of moonlight. The stables are quiet. The only sound being the low rhythmic grunch-grunch of a horse chewing its late-night hay and the heavy sighing breath of a sleeping animal. He enters the keep. The heavy doors close with a dull final thud that echoes up through the central shaft of the tower. The air inside is still warm, smelling of the day's wood smoke and the lingering sweetness of the feast. He climbs the spiral stairs one last time. His legs feel like leaden pillars. His heart rate slows to match the deep, subterranean pulse of the masonry. Each step up is a withdrawal from the world. He reaches the solar. And as he pushes open the heavy oak door, he's met by the soft amber glow of the hearth. The fire has been banked for the night. A thick layer of gray ash covers the glowing heart of the logs to preserve the heat until morning. The room is filled with a soft, pulsing light that creates a sense of profound intimacy. The squire, having long since prepared the chamber, is asleep on a small trundle bed near the door. His breathing steady and rhythmic. The knight moves to the window and closes the heavy wooden shutters. Clack thud. Sealing out the cold and the stars. The world is now reduced to these four stone walls. This dying fire. And the vast, inviting expanse of the bed. He begins the final unclothing. The heavy wool cloak is draped over the chest. The silk surcoat is folded with care. The boots are set aside, their leather smelling of the earth and the night. He stands once more in his simple linen shirt, feeling the air move over his skin. A sensation of immense freedom. He moves to the small crucifix by the bed and kneels for the final time. His evening prayers are shorter. A rhythmic gratias, that's thanks, for the day survived and a plea for the safety of the dawn. The Latin words are a low, humming murmur in the quiet room. A final tether to the divine before he lets go of his consciousness. He climbs into the bed. The straw-filled mattress rustles with a dry, papery hush-hush. The linen sheets are cool at first. But the heavy wool blankets and the fur coverlet soon trap the warmth of his body. He stretches out his limbs, feeling the tension of the day finally, fully dissolving. The weight of the armor. The pressure of the saddle. The grip of the sword. All of it fading away. The rhythmic pop and crackle of the dying embers is his lullaby. He closes his eyes. And the world of the feudal night, the stone, the steel, the forest, and the faith, fades into a soft, gray mist. The sun will rise again in a few short hours. And the cycle will begin anew. The first light. The arming. The mass. And the toil. But for now there is only the silence. The warmth. And the deep, restorative dark. The night has kept his watch. The land is safe. The day is done. Final thoughts. The cycle of the medieval day is far more than a simple passage of time. It's a meticulously ordered journey through the physical, the spiritual, and the communal. As we've seen throughout these past hours together, the life of a feudal knight is a delicate architecture of contrasting worlds. It begins in the quiet, silvered isolation of the first light of dawn, where the man prepares his spirit for the burdens of the flesh. From there we witness the ritual of the arming, a meditative transition from the softness of linen to the unyielding protection of iron, a literal encasement in the duties of his rank. The morning hours brought the spiritual grounding of the Mass and the humble sustenance of the morning meal, reinforcing the knight's place in the divine and social order. This was followed by the heavy necessary labor of the business of the manor, where the knight acted as the anchor of the community, weighing the needs of the land and its people with the steady hand of a judge. The afternoon shifted toward the martial and the wild. In the discipline of the tilt, we felt the thunderous energy of the warrior's craft. A grueling testament to the physical endurance required to maintain the peace. The afternoon hunt then led us away from the stone walls and into the primordial silence of the forest, where the night practiced the ancient rhythms of the predator and the protector. As the light faded, we entered the amber-hued warmth of the evening feast, a celebration of community, hierarchy, and the sensory rewards of a day well lived. Finally, the day closed as it began. In solitude, the night watch returned the night to the cold stone of the battlements, a silent sentinel standing guard over the dreams of those beneath him, before he finally surrendered to the restorative darkness of sleep. Together, these sections reveal a life defined by vigilia, a constant state of alertness and service. The feudal knight was not merely a soldier, but a focal point for the stability of a world that was often harsh and uncertain. In the slow, rhythmic repetition of these 8 sections, we find the heartbeat of an age long past, yet one that still echoes in the stone and the soil. The fire in the hearth has burned down to embers. The watch has been kept, and the day is at last complete.